Hello, everyone. My name is Eric D'Souza, and I am continuing our interviews with the crime writers of Canada, contributors to cold Canadian crime. Joining me today is Lynne Murphy. Good morning, Lynne, or good afternoon, Lynne. How are you today?
Good afternoon, Eric. It's now 2 minutes past 12 in Toronto. I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm good too, and yeah, I'm in BC, so for me, it's still morning. Lynne, let's see, I have your bio here. Lynne was born and raised in Saskatchewan, the province which figures in much of her writing. She was educated at the University of Saskatchewan and Carleton University, and later worked as a journalist in print and radio. Her short fiction has been published in Sisters in Crime Toronto, which I read you were one of the founding members of, so congrats on that one. The Mesdames of Mayhem and Carrick Publishing. She lives in Toronto, and she is, oh, sorry, gonna say it again. She's a founding member of Sisters in Crime Toronto chapter, Madame of Mayhem, and of course, Crime Writers of Canada. Lynne, you're best known for having humorous, funny crime stories, but that's the impression I had of you. But when I read Lady Killer, not so funny at all. So why so serious in this one?
Well, partly it was the title of the anthology, Cold Canadian Crime, and not one of those words is funny, actually. It doesn't inspire humor, an anthology. And I had this idea in my head from way, way back that I thought would work. And I think people tell me it did for the Lady Killer. So it's not a funny story. It's very dark.
When doing my research, I learned that there was a little bit of basis of truth to this, that you were pulling from your childhood or your, I guess, your university days. Is that true? Is this inspired by reality?
When I was in my teens, I was told about, somebody told me about this man whose girlfriends kept having unfortunate accidents, and that stayed with me. And I tried to write the story a few years ago, maybe about 12 years ago, and it didn't work. And I figured out why it didn't work. I wrote it in the first person, and it was left it sort of open-ended. And if you recall the story, it can't be in the first person. It has to be in the third person. So when I rewrote it in the third person, it worked. So for me, anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting because I reread it yesterday, and yeah, I'm trying to think why the first person wouldn't work. Did you have it just didn't work, or?
Well, you know what's going to happen at the ending.
Oh, okay. And that was the only reason?
Yes, yeah. Otherwise, okay. I could have done it in the first person, but when I thought about the ending, I had to make it third person so that I was writing about Julie. She wasn't writing about herself.
Okay, that makes sense then. And again, you don't always rely on humor. I know one of the stories in Potluck, you write about a very serious subject of dementia. So why is it that some of your stories, I mean, maybe it's not a nice question to ask, but why is it some of your stories end up being funny and then sometimes you don't?
I honestly don't know. It's the stories about the ladies in the condo, if you've read them, they tend to be funny because sort of they're very light. You know, the crimes in them are like, one of the crimes is somebody keeping a dog in her apartment when she shouldn't. They're very light stories, and so they're humorous. But some of my other stories are, I guess it's just the subject matter, Eric. When you start writing them, and I couldn't be funny about dementia. You can't be funny about it. Well, I guess you can if people are forgetting things all the time and so on. That's kind of, some people can get humor out of that, but I've known enough people suffering from dementia that's not a funny topic.
Yes, fair enough. You and I were chatting a little bit before, and you were saying that you often thought that crime writing to a certain degree doesn't get the respect it deserves, but when you pair it with humor writing, even less so. Why do you feel that it's, as you say, not respected?
I don't know. I think people think of crime as a serious subject, maybe, and murder is very serious. There are very few murders in my stories. I don't kill off a lot of people. And because I don't think murder is funny, ever. And Melody Campbell says the same thing, that her humorous stories don't get the respect they are nominated for awards and things. We're kind of the low people on the totem pole, although I have heard that the low person on the totem pole is the most important people in Haida. But I'm digressing.
It's true, but even when I think of like Elmer Leonard, there's a few, names escaping me, but there are some humor writers or considered crime writers who rely on humor a fair amount, and they do see their success. But you're right; it's few and far between. I think, for the most part.
Linwood Barclay wrote several very funny Canadian novels, crime novels, and he didn't come to big success until he started getting serious and plots and setting things in the United States. But he has about 3 very funny stories about crime in Canada that he wrote first, I'm sort of sorry he left that genre. Although I admire his writing now.
Yeah, I have to admit, I didn't know that he started on humor. I only know it for his dark stories. So.
Yeah, there's one about how he writes in the first person, and he's shopping with his wife in the grocery store, and she has a habit of leaving her purse in the cart while she's shoving it around. And so he decides to teach her a lesson. So when she's gone away from the cart, and he takes the purse and puts it in the trunk of the car, and it turns out it wasn't her cart at all. He's taken someone else's purse and left her in the shopping cart. And of course, this involves him in a crime, but it's a very funny story. No, like a funny basis for a story.
Yeah. Not the Linwood Barclay I know.
No, not at all.
Well, from your bio, it says you currently live in Toronto, and you're telling me you pretty much live in the center of Toronto. But you were raised in Saskatchewan, and a lot of your stories, including The Lady Killer, take place in Saskatchewan. So why do you often find your settings back at your hometown?
Well, I left Saskatchewan when I was about 19 to go to university in Ottawa, and I've never lived there since. But it really leaves a mark on you being brought up in Saskatchewan. And I was brought up during the war years. I was a child during the Second World War, and the situation, the privation, the threat we all lived under, the fear of people being killed all the time and so on, and the comfort you get from other people and so on. Saskatchewan is just, burned into my system. And I still cheer for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So that shows you how loyal I am after all that time.
Good for you. Do you have what is it? They wear something on their head, don't they?
The Saskatchewan Roughriders?
The fans of the Saskatchewan
watermelons.
Watermelons, yes. I'd like to see you in
Not
that
the
hat.
Roughriders, the fans.
Yes.
They're very devoted fans, and
yes, they are.
And I still break my heart over it when they don't win.
You've been in a few anthologies, but I think you're one of many short story writers in Canada. But it's great that you actually put your short stories together. And I can see the poster in the back of your head.
Yes.
And that's something a lot of authors, short story authors, don't do. They seem to rely on magazines and anthologies. So what inspired you to take it a step further and actually publish your short stories?
Well, part of it was that I had a novella I had written, the one that's in Potluck that we were speaking about, that's set in Saskatchewan. And nobody publishes novellas. You can't get a novella published for love nor money. And I thought, well, if I collect some of my published short stories and put it together with the novella, it will be enough to make a decent sized book. And I wanted to put them together because they were all over the place, the short stories. And I thought, for my grandkids, it will be nice for them to look at that and say, oh, here's a book with Nana's stories in it. So that's what made up my mind. I was doing it for posterity, Eric.
Well, that's a good reason, because I'm sure you're used to seeing your name on the cover of anthologies, but you share it with other people. So Potluck, it's just your name. So congratulations.
Thank you. Oh, it was thrilling. And I hope you notice that that's me on the cover. Sarah Carrick did a wonderful illustration, and she said, I want to use you for the cover. And I said, well, I don't know about that. But when she showed me the picture, I thought, go for it. So
yeah, it's a sweet cover, and it's a unique title too, especially for a collection of short stories that, from what I understand, they vary, and sometimes, like you said, humorous, and sometimes not so much. So it's a great title.
Yeah, when you say we're going to take Potluck, you're going to have to take Potluck with us, and that's what you get when you get a bunch of a lot of short stories together.
I'm assuming you can find the Potluck on Amazon.
Yes, and as is Cold Canadian Crime, and I think we're having a sale on Cold Canadian Crime in December, aren't we? They're on Amazon.
You're taking my lines. Yes.
I'm sorry, Eric.
It's all right.
Forgive me.
Yes, Cold Canadian Crime is currently 40% off both the ebook and the paperback. So I believe, because Amazon's pretty fast, if you order it now, it's still in time to put it under the Christmas tree. But if you want an ebook, I think it's $2.99, which is about as cheap as you can get for a great collection of short stories. Which unfortunately, none of them, I don't think any of them are humorous. They're all quite dark.
They're pretty dark. Can I mention In the Spirit of 13, the Mesdames new anthology that came out just this fall?
Please do.
I have another short story in it called Gracie the Invisible Dog, which is about an invisible dog called Gracie, which is and that's inspired. My daughter has a visual impairment, and when she was diagnosed, she said the only good thing about it was that she might be able to get a dog. And we started imagining this dog she would get, but the dog is not imaginary. Gracie is not imaginary. She is invisible.
Sounds like a very sweet story.
It is. It's quite well, no, it's actually not. It has a very dark ending too, Eric.
Okay. Right, Lynn. It was a pleasure talking to you today. Actually, it's the first time we've met, so it's a pleasure meeting you. And to everyone else watching, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much, Eric, for having me. I enjoyed it.